For 2 years, I fell in love with the man sitting beside me, without hearing his voice even once. Every morning he arrived at exactly 8 o'clock with a blue coffee cup. Every morning I arrived 1 minute later carrying a white cup of tea. We never exchanged a single word. We never smiled. We never introduced ourselves. Yet somehow, he became the most important person in my life. Then one Monday morning, his desk was empty. 3 weeks later, I discovered the quiet man beside me wasn't just another employee. He was the CEO of the entire company. My name is Audrey, and until all of this happened, my life was painfully ordinary. I was 29 years old, lived alone in a small apartment overlooking downtown Chicago, and followed the same routine every single day. At exactly 7 every morning, my alarm would ring. I would make myself a cup of tea, stand by the window, and watch thousands of strangers rushing through the streets below. The city never stopped moving, but somehow I always felt as though I was standing completely still, watching life instead of living it. That feeling had become strangely comforting. Safe, predictable, invisible. I worked as a content writer for one of the largest marketing companies in the city. My job wasn't glamorous, but I loved words. I loved finding the perfect sentence, fixing tiny mistakes, polishing every paragraph until it felt effortless. While everyone else filled the office with conversations, laughter, and endless meetings, I quietly disappeared behind my computer screen. Most people barely noticed I was there. To be honest, I preferred it that way. There was only one person who seemed to understand that kind of silence. His name was Gabriel. He sat at the desk beside mine every single morning without fail. 8 o'clock sharp! Never early, never late. He always carried the same blue ceramic coffee mug, wore simple gray sweaters that somehow looked effortlessly elegant, and organized everything on his desk with almost impossible precision. His pens were perfectly aligned. His notebook was always centered. Even the way he typed had a rhythm, steady, calm, almost comforting. Our routine became something neither of us ever acknowledged. Yet neither of us ever broke. He arrived at 8. I arrived 1 minute later. He drank black coffee. I drank tea with milk. The office buzzed with conversations around us. But somehow, our corner remained untouched by the noise. It felt like we existed inside our own quiet little world, separated from everyone else by an invisible wall. Sometimes I caught myself watching him for a second longer than I should have. Not because he was unusually handsome, although he was. Not because he dressed better than everyone else, although he did. It was his calmness. In a building full of people desperate to be noticed, Gabriel seemed perfectly comfortable disappearing into the background. Just like me. Weeks turned into months. Months quietly became 2 years. We never spoke. Not once. Yet I learned everything that silence could teach me. I knew exactly when he was concentrating, because he tapped his blue pen twice against the desk. I knew when he was tired because he'd gently rubbed the bridge of his nose before taking another sip of coffee. I knew when he approved of something he'd written because the corner of his mouth would lift into the smallest smile. He probably noticed things about me too. The way I always reread every paragraph 3 times before sending it. The way I stirred my tea exactly 5 times without thinking. The way I tucked loose strands of hair behind my ear whenever I became nervous. We were strangers, but somehow, we knew each other better than most people ever could. Every evening, we'd leave the office without saying goodbye. Every morning, we'd return to the same desks and continue our quiet existence as though nothing in the world could ever change. I honestly believed it never would. I was wrong, because the following Monday morning, for the very first time in 2 years, Gabriel's chair was empty. I still remember that morning with painful clarity. The elevator doors opened onto the 8th floor. Exactly 1 minute after 8. Just as they always did. I walked toward the office kitchen, filled my white ceramic cup with hot tea, added a splash of milk, stirred it 5 times without thinking, and smiled to myself. Some habits become so deeply woven into your life that they feel permanent. Gabriel's presence had become one of those habits. I never questioned it. I never imagined a morning without seeing his blue coffee mug waiting on the desk beside mine. When I reached my workstation, my footsteps slowed. Something felt wrong. His chair was empty. Not the kind of empty that says someone is running late. The kind of empty that feels abandoned. His blue mug was gone. His notebook was gone. Even the neatly aligned pens had disappeared. Only the computer monitor remained, black and lifeless, as if no one had ever worked there. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. I looked at the office clock. 8:05 a.m. Gabriel had never been late. Not once. I placed my tea on my desk without taking a sip and kept staring at the empty chair, expecting him to appear around the corner at any second with his usual calm expression. He never did. The office slowly filled with voices. People laughed. Phones started ringing. Printers hummed. Yet, everything sounded distant, almost underwater. For the first time in 2 years, the silence between our desks wasn't peaceful. It was painful. Around 9 o'clock, Stella and Hazel stopped beside the coffee machine, whispering just loudly enough for me to hear. Did you hear about Gabriel? No. What happened? He's gone. Gone? Did he quit? I don't know. Nobody seems to know. I heard HR cleaned out his desk before anyone arrived. Their conversation ended as quickly as it began. But those 4 words stayed trapped inside my mind. He's gone. Gone where? Why? Without saying goodbye, I wanted to walk over and ask them everything they knew. Instead, I stayed exactly where I always stayed. Silent, invisible, safe. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. I opened my laptop and tried to focus on work. The words blurred together. Every few seconds my eyes drifted back toward the empty desk. I missed something I had never admitted mattered. The gentle sound of his keyboard. The quiet sip of coffee every morning. The comforting certainty that someone understood silence as well as I did. It was ridiculous. We had never spoken. Not once. So why did losing him feel like losing someone important? By lunchtime, I had rewritten the same paragraph 6 different times. Nothing sounded right. Nothing felt right. Even my tea tasted different. The office itself felt unfamiliar, as though Gabriel's absence had somehow changed the entire room. That evening, I rode the bus home without noticing the streets outside the window. Chicago rushed past in flashes of headlights and crowded sidewalks. But my thoughts never left the office. Where had he gone? Was he sick? Did something happen? Would he ever come back? At home, I stood by my apartment window with another cup of tea. The city looked exactly the same, but something inside me had changed. I finally admitted a truth I had been hiding from myself for 2 years. I hadn't simply enjoyed sitting beside Gabriel. I had built my entire day around his quiet presence. Without realizing it, I had fallen in love with a man whose voice I had never heard. The realization terrified me. How could someone become so important without a single conversation? How could silence create feelings words never had? I barely slept that night. The next morning, I rushed to work earlier than usual, hoping yesterday had been some strange misunderstanding. It wasn't. His desk was still empty. So was the next day. And the day after that. A week passed. Then, another. No replacement ever sat there. No explanation was ever given. The empty desk became a ghost haunting every workday. Eventually, I stopped looking at it. Not because I had moved on, but because looking hurt too much. Then, on a cold Monday morning, just as I was forcing myself back into another ordinary day, Mrs. Smith appeared beside my desk holding a thick black folder. "Audrey," she said with a professional smile, "I have a very important project for you." My fingers froze above the keyboard. This assignment comes directly from the head of strategy. She placed the folder in front of me. "His name is..." She paused. "Mr. Gabriel King." Mrs. Smith's words echoed inside my head long after she walked away. Gabriel King. The name felt strangely familiar. I couldn't explain why. Maybe I had heard people mention it in passing. Maybe it was just another executive whose emails everyone seemed afraid of. I looked down at the thick project folder resting on my desk. Confidential strategic rebranding campaign. This wasn't an ordinary assignment. It was the biggest project I'd ever been trusted with. My fingers tightened around the folder. "Send your first draft by tomorrow morning," Mrs. Smith had said. "Mr. King expects exceptional work." Exceptional. The word alone was enough to make my stomach twist. I carried the folder home that evening, instead of taking my usual bus ride through the city. For the first time in weeks, I ignored the skyline outside my apartment window. Instead, I spread papers across my dining table, opened my laptop, and started writing. Hour after hour disappeared. I rewrote headlines, changed paragraphs, deleted pages, started over. By midnight, my apartment was silent, except for the tapping of my keyboard. By 2 in the morning, cold tea sat untouched beside me. By 4, I finally smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best work I'd ever written. The next morning, after reading every sentence 3 times, as I always did, I attached the document to an email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Dear Mr. King." Instead, I spread papers across my dining table, opened my laptop, and started writing. Hour after hour disappeared. I rewrote headlines, changed paragraphs, deleted pages, started over. By midnight, my apartment was silent, except for the tapping of my keyboard. By 2 in the morning, cold tea sat untouched beside me. By 4, I finally smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best work I'd ever written. The next morning, after reading every sentence 3 times, as I always did, I attached the document to an email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Dear Mr. King, dear Audrey, thank you for your thoughtful draft. The overall structure is strong, and your writing is remarkably clear. I have a few suggestions that might strengthen the second section, particularly the transition before the customer narrative. Excellent work. Regards, Gabriel King." I read the email once, then again, then a third time. Something felt familiar. It wasn't the feedback. It wasn't the wording. It was the rhythm. The way every sentence flowed. The way every compliment was balanced with gentle criticism. The way every observation was precise, but never harsh. I had seen writing like this before, many times. Suddenly, I remembered Gabriel, the quiet man beside me. Sometimes he left handwritten notes on his desk before meetings. I had accidentally glanced at them more than once. The handwriting, the sentence structure, the careful choice of words. This email felt exactly the same. "No," I whispered to myself. "It can't be. Thousands of people could write politely. Thousands of people could use good grammar. I was imagining things. I had to be." Still, my fingers moved across the keyboard almost on their own. "Thank you for your feedback. I'll revise the second section immediately. Would you recommend expanding the customer story or shortening the introduction instead?" I pressed send, then waited. 32 minutes later, another notification. "Expand the customer story. Facts inform people. Stories make them remember. Your instinct is already pointing in the right direction. Trust it, Gabriel." I smiled without realizing it. Those last 2 words, "trust it," for some reason, they felt personal, almost encouraging. The following days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Every morning, I worked. Every afternoon, I sent revisions. Every evening, Gabriel King replied, sometimes within an hour, sometimes late at night, sometimes before I even expected him to. Our conversations stayed completely professional, yet somehow, they never felt cold. He noticed details no one else ever noticed. He complimented ideas instead of just results. He challenged my thinking without making me doubt myself. For the first time in years, I actually looked forward to opening my inbox. His emails slowly became the highlight of my day. One afternoon, while rereading one of his replies, my eyes stopped on a single sentence. "Excellent attention to detail." I froze. Months earlier, Simona had left a handwritten sticky note on the desk beside mine. I had accidentally seen it while Gabriel stepped away for coffee. It contained the exact same words. Excellent attention to detail. Same wording, same style, even the punctuation. A chill ran down my spine. I opened another email. Then another. Then another. The more I read, the stronger the feeling became. This wasn't coincidence. Whoever Gabriel King was, he reminded me of someone I couldn't stop thinking about. Someone who arrived every morning at exactly 8 o'clock, carrying a blue coffee mug. By the beginning of the third week, something had changed. The project was no longer the reason I opened my inbox every morning. Gabriel was. Every notification made my heart race. Every reply made me smile. I told myself it was because I respected his feedback, because he understood writing, because he appreciated details that everyone else ignored. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I wasn't waiting for feedback anymore. I was waiting for him. One Tuesday afternoon, I sent him another revised chapter. This time, I expected the usual corrections. Instead, his reply contained only one sentence. "You have a rare gift, Audrey. Never let anyone convince you to write smaller than your imagination." I stared at the screen. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that. Not my teachers, not my coworkers, not even my parents. For years, people had praised my work. Gabriel praised me. There was a difference. A very big difference. Without realizing it, I read the sentence 5 more times. Then I saved the email. I didn't know why. I just couldn't bring myself to delete it. Over the next few days, our conversations became longer. Still professional, still focused on the project. But somehow, they felt warmer. He started asking questions. What inspired this paragraph? Why did you choose this example? Which author influenced your writing style? For the first time in years, someone genuinely wanted to know how my mind worked, and I found myself wanting to know about his. One evening, after finishing another revision, I almost typed the question. "Were you ever an ordinary employee?" My fingers rested on the keyboard. Then, I deleted it. It wasn't professional. It wasn't appropriate. Besides, what if I was completely wrong? What if Gabriel King was simply another executive who happened to write like the man from the next desk? I closed my laptop, but the question refused to leave my mind. The following morning, I arrived at work exactly 1 minute after 8. Habit. Some habits never disappear. As I walked toward my desk, my eyes drifted, just for a second, to the empty chair beside mine. It was still untouched. No replacement. No blue coffee mug. No perfectly aligned pens. Only silence. A silence that somehow felt louder every single day. I sat down, opened my laptop, and noticed a new email waiting. From Gabriel King. My pulse instantly quickened. I opened it. "Good morning, Audrey. I've reviewed the latest version. Excellent work. I think we're finally ready to present it. Thank you for your patience, your dedication, and your remarkable attention to detail. I'd like to thank you personally. Would you be available to meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. in my office?" Gabriel King. I stopped breathing. A meeting. In person. For nearly a month, Gabriel King had existed only through emails. Tomorrow, he would become real. I read the message again and again. Then my eyes stopped on something strange. He had signed it. Gabriel, not Mr. King, not CEO. Just Gabriel. Exactly the way I had imagined the quiet man beside me would sign an email. A strange feeling settled inside my chest. Half excitement, half fear. That night, sleep became impossible. I stood in front of my closet, longer than I ever had before. Black dress? Blue blouse? Gray blazer? I laughed at myself. It's just a meeting. Then, why did it feel like something much bigger? Eventually, I chose a simple black dress. Professional. Elegant. Safe. The next morning, I barely touched my breakfast. My tea grew cold on the kitchen counter. For the first time in years, I forgot to drink it. The bus ride felt endless. Every traffic light seemed determined to keep me waiting. When I finally reached the office, I couldn't focus on anything. At exactly 9:45 a.m., I stood up from my desk. Everyone else continued working. No one looked at me. No one knew this meeting was about to change my life forever. I walked toward the elevators. Press the button for the executive floor. As the doors closed, my reflection stared back at me. You'll be fine, I whispered. The elevator began climbing. Floor 9, 10, 11, 12. Each floor felt like another heartbeat, another step toward a truth I couldn't yet see. The doors slid open. The executive floor was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Dark walnut walls, soft lighting, thick carpets that swallowed every footstep. Floor to ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Everything felt quiet. Expensive? Powerful. A receptionist looked up with a warm smile. You must be Audrey. I nodded. Mr. King is expecting you. She pointed toward the end of a long hallway. Last office on the right. I swallowed hard. Every step echoed inside my chest. At the very end of the hallway, I stopped. A large walnut door stood before me. Polished brass letters gleamed beneath the lights. Gabriel King, Chief Executive Officer. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I slowly raised my trembling hand and knocked. A familiar voice answered from inside. Come in. I froze. I knew that voice. Even though I'd never actually heard it before, somehow, I knew it. For a moment. Couldn't move. My hand remained frozen on the doorknob as the familiar voice echoed through the office. Come in. I slowly pushed the door open. The office was breathtaking. Floor to ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, stretching endlessly beneath a cloudy morning sky. A massive walnut desk stood in the center of the room, surrounded by shelves filled with books instead of awards. It didn't feel cold. It felt unexpectedly quiet, almost peaceful. Behind the desk stood a man adjusting the sleeve of his charcoal suit. He looked up. Our eyes met. Time stopped. It was him. Gabriel, the man who had sat beside me every morning for 2 years. The man with the blue coffee mug. The man who never spoke. The man I thought had simply disappeared. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. Every memory crashed into me at once. The gray sweaters, the perfectly lined-up pens, the quiet mornings, the empty desk, the emails. Everything suddenly fit together. And yet, none of it made sense. He gave me the same gentle smile I'd seen hundreds of times from the corner of my eye. Good morning, Audrey. His voice was calm, warm, exactly the way I had imagined it. It was the only word I could manage. He nodded slowly. Yes. Silence filled the room. Not the comfortable silence we used to share. This one was heavy, painful, confusing. You were... I swallowed hard. The CEO? Another quiet nod. Yes. I stared at him in disbelief. No, I whispered. No, that's impossible. I know how it looks. Do you? My voice cracked. For 2 years I sat beside you. You watched me every single day. You let me believe you were just another employee. You disappeared without saying a word. And now, I looked around the enormous office. You're telling me you own the entire company. His expression didn't change. There was no arrogance, no pride, only regret. I never wanted to hurt you. Hurt me. A small, bitter laugh escaped my lips. I didn't even know your last name. I didn't know where you lived. I didn't know anything about you. And somehow, I shook my head. You knew everything about me. His eyes dropped toward the floor. I know. For the first time since entering the room, I noticed something strange. On the corner of his desk sat the same blue ceramic coffee mug. The exact one. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't similar. It was his. A wave of emotion hit me so suddenly that my vision blurred. You kept it. He looked at the mug. A faint smile appeared. I never stopped using it. My chest tightened. So, none of it was fake? He met my eyes again. No, the coffee wasn't fake. The routines weren't fake. The silence wasn't fake. Then what was? I asked quietly. What exactly was real? He walked around the desk. Not like a CEO approaching an employee, but like Gabriel walking toward the woman who had shared 2 years of silent mornings with him. He stopped a few feet away. Everything. His answer came almost as a whisper. Everything except my title. I wanted to believe him. I truly did, but my heart refused. You should have told me. I wanted to. When? The first week? The first month? After 1 year? After 2? Each question landed harder than the last. He never interrupted, never defended himself. When I finally stopped talking, he quietly said, "I was afraid." I frowned. Afraid? He nodded. Not of losing my position. He looked directly into my eyes. Afraid of losing the only place where nobody treated me like a CEO. The room fell silent again. His words hung in the air between us. For the first time, I didn't see the expensive office. I didn't see the tailored suit. I didn't see the title on the door. I saw the quiet man who used to sip coffee beside me every morning, looking lonelier than anyone I'd ever met. Still, my heart wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. I think, I whispered, taking a slow step backward. You owe me the truth. Gabriel nodded without hesitation. I do. He pulled out the chair beside the window instead of the one across his desk, the same way coworkers would sit together, not a CEO and an employee. He looked at me quietly. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you everything. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to leave, to walk out, to protect myself. But another part of me, the part that had missed him every single morning, needed answers. Slowly, I sat down. Gabriel took the seat beside me. Not across from me, beside me, exactly where he'd always been. He took a slow breath, looked out across the city, then began to tell me the truth.